Hello, friends. Chris Corsi here, president of Thrive Today, and I want to welcome you to the Relational Skills in Real Life podcast. Friends, today's topic is the Relational Skills Laboratory for Quieting. That's right, the Relational Skills Laboratory for Quieting. You know what? Quieting is one of those skills that touches everything. In fact, some of us are just so used to thinking about quieting and practicing quieting that we don't even really think much about it. When we think about skill two, we think, you know what, I've got this skill. Why do I need to pay any attention to this skill? Well, friends, you know what? I have a lot of colleagues and friends who have discovered that when they think they're practicing skill two quieting, they're actually not. So we're going to tease this out a little bit today on how do I know if I'm actually practicing this skill and what are some ways to be able to quiet? Because you know what works for me might not work for you. And so we have to find what is tailor made for our body and our mind and our nervous system to help us be able to enter into this restorative rest, which is the ability to self quiet. All right. And when we quiet, we should feel refreshed, restored, and even recharged in our capacity. What that means is if quieting is working, I should feel my capacity growing after I quiet. And if I'm trying to quiet and I'm not feeling restored or refreshed, you know what? There might be something here that needs to be tweaked or adjusted in some way. Because many of us feel like we're quieting and it's just part of who we are and what we do, but we might be short circuiting the process. And I've talked to people who have found that resting has not been restorative for them. And as we've been able to tease it out a little bit, they found what they were doing was actually distracting themselves. So they weren't actually quieting, they were just distracting themselves. They were being still, but they weren't actually feeling refreshed. Even though they were being still, their mind was still working. And you know what? Your thoughts affect your body, whether it's positive thoughts like appreciation or whether it's negative thoughts. Thoughts change your body and your nervous system. So, what we do with our thoughts is going to touch everything. So if quieting isn't peaceful for you or your family or your friends, then something needs to be teased out and adjusted so that you can better quiet. And you know what? When I think about this skill, I think about my friend Mark. Mark's been learning to rest for a number of years now. Rest is just part of his day, part of his schedule. He takes time to disconnect and he takes time to try to quiet. But you know what Mark's observing? Rest isn't restorative. So when he tries to rest, what's happening is he's thinking about the problems, he's thinking about the fears, and he's thinking about the pain. And so what Mark has done is he pushes and pushes and drives himself into overdrive and overwhelm because he's not actually experiencing shalom, where everything is just where it needs to be in a peaceful sort of way. And so Mark is not getting refreshed. His mind and body are not slowing down. And what Mark's been discovering as he's been really focusing on this with a little bit more of a magnifying glass is he's discovering that he's very uncomfortable and even a bit grumpy when he tries to rest because what happens is unprocessed pain in the form of implicit memory. So let me clarify. Unprocessed pain in the form of implicit memory means that you're actually remembering pain, but you're not consciously aware that you're remembering. So implicit memory involves the feelings that I feel, the sensations that I feel. So it's actually unprocessed pain that's sneaking into my mind and my body without asking my permission. And so when Mark tries to quiet, what tends to happen is he's noticing he's having implicit memory come up, which actually makes it hard for him to rest and be still. So what does he do? He pushes it back down. And instead of being able to process those feelings, as this is an opportunity for some healing, he pushes them down, which then drains his capacity and puts him in enemy mode. And so what Mark was doing is a sort of artificial quieting. So Mark was not actually quieting. He was doing an artificial forced version that was not working. So as I started to discover this, I started working with him and help walking him through the steps of being able to take some deep breaths. Tried practicing tightening his body muscles and loosening, and start noticing his body and where is anxiety showing up in his body. And Mark started practicing some positive memories, reflection. So he's thinking about the good stuff and then letting himself feel the good stuff. And then he's even practicing connecting with Jesus a little bit and being able to rest with a greater mind who's with him and who's helping him to be still. So these small steps actually were helping Mark be able to better rest and quiet and be still. And it was restoring him. You could actually see the difference on Mark now when he was starting to quiet and calm his body and his mind. So this skill of resting touches all the 19 skills, because you know what? You can't grow joy if you're tired. So rest makes joy possible. Rest makes appreciation and relational living possible, because what rest does is it recharges your battery so that you can think about the good stuff and stay with the good stuff by feeling the good stuff, which helps turn on your brain's relational circuits. And so rest is one of the ways we actually get out of enemy mode, but we avoid enemy mode. So we take a breather when we need to. My ability to quiet makes it possible to return to joy, because I'm learning to feel, share, and quiet my upsets. So if I can't rest and I have no quieting to return to from my upsets, and often people are doing a bit of a counterfeit version of rest when they think they're bouncing back to joy and peace, they're just moving on. We would call that an imposter skill. An imposter skill is, it looks like a relational skill, it sounds like a relational skill, it smells and feels like a relational skill, but it's not actually a relational skill. It's an imposter skill. And so people aren't actually getting to a place of joy and peace from their upsets. They're just moving on. And the thing that takes a hit when we push away those feelings with that implicit memory is our capacity is compromised. So quieting should always restore our capacity. So rest and quieting are really behind everything, all these relational skills. That helps us be able to use the relational skills. Otherwise, we just distract, we stay busy, we focus on other things. Maybe we turn to food and drinks, television, social media, um, basically internet searching, anything that distracts me and makes it possible for me to avoid quieting. And so your capacity to carry weight is quickly compromised when you're not quieting and you're not resting in the ways that you need to rest. So there's actually a lot of different ways to find rest, and what works for one person might not work for the other. And so quiet is the on-demand release of serotonin, where we can feel peaceful and filled with shalom, where everything is just where it needs to be. And serotonin is one of those chemicals that actually affects all the other chemicals in our body, and it actually affects our dopamine levels, it affects endorphins, oxytocin. Serotonin is a good thing to have around. And as we start getting later in the day, our serotonin levels will start to climb, because we're getting closer to bedtime. And so we start feeling that peaceful, calm, tired feeling, like, I hear my bed calling me here. And so practicing quieting should leave us feeling peaceful and refreshed. And unfortunately, for a lot of us, it just doesn't. And so some of us are high energy people. So in order to access rest, we have to unload energy to enter that low energy quieting state. So we actually have to do something to move our body in order to rest. One of my sons finds it very difficult to rest. So he actually has to do something, go run around the yard and run around the house a few times, or walk on the treadmill, or do some movement or some stretching to be able to access the quieting skills. So that's actually fairly common, where people have to do something to access the quieting state. They have to unload some energy first. And some of us just we need to train our brain to focus on and activate the skill of appreciation, which soothes us. So appreciation is actually what makes the quieting possible. It's really hard to quiet if you're thinking about what upsets you. because thinking about what upsets you basically activates all these unhelpful systems in our brain and our body and our nervous system that prepare us to run, to fight, to do something in a high arousal state. And so we need to practice being able to access the good thoughts, so to speak, and thinking about the good stuff and remembering times of joy, and that actually helps us to quiet. Some of us actually need to get some of the rocks out of our shoe, which would be the unprocessed pain and that implicit memory that keeps knocking on the door of our awareness. Pushing it down doesn't resolve it. It actually just, in a sense, gives it more power. It's like taking a little snowball and rolling it down a snow-filled hill. The snowball is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger over time. So pushing down feelings we don't want to feel actually makes it harder to manage them. So we learn to feel our feelings, share our feelings, and then we can quiet our feelings. And that actually helps to make the quieting more accessible for us. So don't fight it. We have to learn to feel those feelings. Some of us need to stretch our body, or we need to exercise in order to loosen up to quieting. I find a lot of people benefit from the muscle tightening exercises where you tighten certain muscle groups and then you begin to loosen them. And some of us need to talk to Jesus and have a greater mind that's non-anxious that we can be with, so that we can be still and let our guard down long enough to be able to quiet. Um, you know what? Some of us just think that to rest and quiet, we have to like spend an hour trying to do it. No, we're talking about minutes, like at least a 3 minute, yeah, 5 minutes would be great, but we're just talking about a couple of minutes. And for many of us, we can start out quieting, but then our mind gets busy and we start getting distracted. So we have to learn how to recognize that drifting and be able to go back and focus on our body and try to be still. I find that, working with a physical therapist helps. Actually getting your body, different muscle groups engaged, can go a long way as you just start focusing on those different muscle groups and notice where you're not using certain muscle groups, and how to turn on different muscle groups can actually help people be able to enter quieting, just like a hot bath or a hot tub can actually help with the quieting as well. But for many of us, we have attachment pain under the surface, which is loss. And attachment pain shows up in implicit memory, where I just feel like I need to do something to get away from these feelings. And I just want to avoid these feelings. And that makes it hard to quiet, because when we quiet, guess what? Implicit memory starts knocking on the door, and our survival circuit says, hey, there's something here I need to deal with. Let's do this. So basically give yourself permission to rest, everything from the body movement, the exercise, unloading that energy, physical therapy, hot bath, um, tensing muscle groups, loosening muscle groups. Find what works for you and start practicing. And in order to enter and stay in a restful state, move your phone. Don't have your phone by you. About 2/3 of us hold our breath when we're on our phone, which just basically is preparing and priming your body for activity. Yeah, it's called email apnea. Linda Stone discovered that years ago. Screen apnea. So we want to breathe. The secret to quieting, the back door to quieting, is our breathing. So learning to take some deep breaths, open up the diaphragm and so forth, actually helps us be able to quiet. But find what works for you and practice with other people. Find some friends who will practice with you. Share some stories about successful quieting moments and what that was like. All of these things can go a long way. You know what? Quieting skills are woven throughout a lot of our materials, but we actually have some habit builder courses focusing on this skill. So you can visit our website at Thrive Today and be able to do exercises specifically designed to help you quiet. A little bit of rest goes a long way.